Hello, my name is Gary Mansfield, and this is the Ministry of Arts podcast, where each week I'll be speaking to a different artist. Now let's begin by banging these bongos.
Yeah, right. Crazy.
Hello, and welcome to episode 231 of the Ministry of Arts podcast. Before I take you to this week's guest, I just thought I'd let you know that our first lot of merchandise has just landed. It is t-shirts, hoodies and tote bags. The first design is, well, you've just heard it actually. Now let's begin by banging these bongos. And they are in both male and female sizes. Well, apart from the tote bags, they're non-binary. You can find the link to the merch shop in the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile. There is a Linktree drop-down box, and I think it's the top box there. And I've also put it on my personal Instagram profile, Mizog Art. And 100% of the proceeds go back into this podcast to keep it growing. But back to today's guest. Way back in, I think it was April, I finally got to speak with Dameon Preistly. He grew up in Northern Ireland during the Troubles, which I think I may have mentioned it in this episode, but us over here on the mainland just used to see it on the news every now and then when something happened. But I mean, the reality was what we saw on the news every now and then was, well, it's pretty much an everyday occurrence for the people living in it, you know. So Dameon, like many others, made it over to the mainland as soon as they were able. And, well, what was Northern Ireland's loss is the mainland's gain, right? But find that out for yourself, so please come with me as I spoke to Dameon Preistly. Anyway, how are you this fine morning?
All good, buddy. All good. It's been a busy few weeks, obviously for you too. But yeah, all good. In actual fact, just before I hooked up on this, I was checking my emails and I got an email from Mr. Childish.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So we normally get the train into London together on a Thursday. It's not a planned thing, but I keep on running into him. So he texted me. He messaged me this morning. Said, "Are you on the 10:30 choo choo?" And I said, "No." I said, "You're on your own today." So nobody else can put up with him apart from you and me, I think. So that's it.
He's great stuff, isn't he?
He's top notch. I moved to Rochester 10 years ago. And after sizing each other up for about 18 months, we eventually started to speak. So we have a healthy disregard for everybody apart from each other.
No, that's not a bad thing. That's
It's
not a
really
bad
not.
thing at all. Yeah, I don't know. I think that may be why I got on so well with him as
He
well.
did say
Just
that.
that cynical look in the world.
He did say that to me. Yeah.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with that as well. Questioning everything in front of you, that's for sure.
200%. I think that's why he threw my hat in the ring for you, you know. So, yeah. When him and me get together, it's a bit like Pete and Dud, to be quite frank. But there you go.
Mate, that is not a bad thing, that's for sure.
It's not.
Dameon, I do have 7 questions that I ask each artist.
Yep.
And the first being, how would you explain what you do to someone that wouldn't know your work?
Okay, how would I explain that? It's a question I've been asked many, many times, obviously, and I've been, you know, lots of presentations and stuff. And I always pitch it in a way that it isn't for people who necessarily know anything about art. Because in actual fact, I kind of regard myself as a storyteller, first of all, and an artist second. I know that sounds a bit kind of trite, but storyteller is predominantly what I am. Everything I do is led by the narrative. But what I would say is that my work is a reflection of social injustice and also cultural movements born of societal upheaval. So I look back in things from history, do my research on those things, and try to capture the essence as truly as I can based on the facts in a way which is visually contemporary, but on 2 levels can be viewed at just as a competent piece of artwork, but really it's the story involved in that. I know that's a long-winded way of explaining it, but it's basically looking at societal injustice over the last 200 years, really, and telling it in a contemporary fashion.
Yeah, well, I mean, that does actually sum it up, because your work does very much feel like that it's a contemporary message with nostalgic imagery,
Correct.
if you don't mind me saying.
Not at all.
Obviously, by your accent, you're not from Rochester
No.
originally. Where do you come from, mate?
So born in 1966 in Belfast. I say East Belfast because when you say Belfast, the next question is, they start to go down the path of which foot you kick with, as they say, where I come
Of
from,
course, yeah.
But that's kind of irrelevant to me. So, but Belfast 66, and I finished school in 84, went to art college, and graduated in 1988. Moved to London. I was in London for 25 years, mostly in North London. And then 10 years ago moved on to Rochester. So that's the journey.
Did you have creativity in the home growing up?
Very much so. So I have cousins. This is on both sides, mother's family and father's family. I have cousins who are artists and designers. My father was a painter and decorator by trade back in the day, but he was very, very competent in sign writing. And my grandfather, similarly, they did all sorts of, very, very clever painting techniques and sign writing as well. I had uncles who could paint to a certain level. I had uncles on both sides, actually, who could do all of that, and aunts who were interior designers. So it's throughout the whole family. But the only person who was really sort of, shall we say, foolish enough to jump ship and actually throw his lot in with trying to make a living out of full-time art was me. Nobody else was stupid enough to try that,
Yeah, they all took the safe and some would say sensible route.
Well, yeah.
Did you have any contact with those who were creative at the time? Creatively, I meant. Would you sort of, watch what they were doing and ask questions and pick up tips and what have you?
Well, occasionally I would watch them, and as I say, my father was a pretty competent artist too, actually, and I remember watching him going through the process, and a few others, cousins and stuff who could draw. But I never really took any inspiration from that at all, to be quite frank. The thing that I remember from growing up, which was my biggest inspiration for my artwork now, is actually the conversations which are being held in my grandmother's house or my aunts and uncle's house. Were all, about politics, about social movements and all of those things. All very, very serious and earnest conversations because of what was unfolding outside our front door, obviously, and the troubles in Northern Ireland. So it was listening to how people thought and processed things, which is really, really what influenced me. I read a lot of American comic books when I was a kid, and so the illustrators in those comic books were my drawing instructors for sure. You got everything in there. You got your topography and your layout and your action and your drama, and everything's in there that you need to know. So they were the inspiration and my training ground for perfecting what I could already do. I could always draw. I could draw from a very, very early age. But the thing that really fed how my brain worked in conjunction with the art was the conversations unfolding around me, and also what was happening outside the front door.
Yeah. So I presume that when you was listening to the stories, the imagery was just being created in your mind anyhow.
Absolutely.
You said about what was going on the outside your front door at the time of the troubles. Was you in close enough to where it was going on for it to be a daily visual occurrence?
200%. Absolutely. As I say, the part of Belfast I grew up, it wasn't the worst by any means, but you couldn't say that it was untouched for sure.
Yeah.
So the 11th of July, the bonfires at the corner of the street, certain stretches of the road, all stretches of the road with the flags and the bunting and everything else, not in a celebratory way of any kind, but just as a kind of a paramilitary totem, shall we say.
Yeah.
But having said that, from the age of 12, 1978, all of my friends who I met through various channels were all Catholic. I grew up on a Protestant side. So that was a rare thing for somebody from East Belfast to have friends from a nearby, not even Catholic, but quite Republican enclave, So it never bothered me. My grandparents were of mixed background as well. So, and my family, brought me up the right way to see that
Yeah.
people are people, and that if the working class people on both sides were allowed to be left alone and unified, then it would shake the government to its core.
Yeah.
But that's a whole
Mind you,
different.
that's the same in sort of every trouble or disturbance or whatever's
Sure.
happening. It's normally the people at the top causing the fucking problems and riling up those further down the ladder, isn't it?
God forbid that anybody put on a unified face, because then there'll be a whole different result at the ballot box,
Wouldn't there just? When was it that you decided that you wanted to become an artist?
Well, again, I know this sounds a bit, not so sure what way it sounds, but I'll say it anyway. I think that you're born an artist or you're not born an artist. It's your choice whether or not you pursue it or not. But the combination of being able to draw or paint with the extra bit of the creativity and the storytelling is my definition of being an artist. There's lots of painters, but very few artists. And I don't believe that all artwork should be purely decorative. I believe it should be there for another reason. Go to any National Gallery or museum, and you'll see that. Although back in the day they were controlled by the church and state, told what to paint up until the late 1800s. But as far as I'm concerned, I was born an artist. When I was asked in primary school, what do you want to be when you grow up? I said, I already know, I'm going to be an artist. And I maintained that all the way through my schooling. I went to a very good grammar school back in the day in Northern Ireland. The way the education system worked was if you passed your 11 plus, you went to a grammar school. It was nothing to do with your family background or the money you had, because if it was, I wouldn't have been there. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's for absolutely sure. But it was a very academic school. They tried their very, very best to stop me pursuing anything to do with art. So much so that when I came to my A level, they failed me in my art A level, having got over 90% all the way through. So I went along to my interview for art college, and I got in right away. And they couldn't really believe what had happened. But I knew I was born an artist, and I knew that that's what I was. There was no other choice. That's what I was always going to do.
What sort of stuff was you doing back then at the age of 17 or whatever you, when you was going to college?
So I actually, most of my friends were considerably older than me. So I was born in 66. Most of my friends were 59, 60, 61, born in those years. I mean,
that was a bit concerning at first. I thought you was knocking about with old men.
No, you seem to forget there wasn't any priests in East Belfast. Yeah. What was I going to say? So yeah, they were kind of born then. So they would have been original punks, sort of 77, 78 kind of thing. Arguably, yeah, punk started in 76. But what I'm saying is, for the sake of argument, 77, 78, they were all punks in Belfast. And a couple of them went over to live in London in 77, 78, and all the rest of it. So, they were kind of the friends that I grew up with. So consequently, at the age of 17, most of them were still in bands, or they were involved in that kind of scene, fashion, music, fanzines, all that kind of stuff. So I got involved producing record covers, little things for their little sort of mixtapes and their cassette tapes, band posters, all that kind of stuff. And I was also customizing 83, for instance. I was customizing ghetto blasters, because the early days of hip hop were really just coming out, and I was reading about that. I'm fascinated by that creativity from the Lower East Side of New York and stuff. And I thought, that's the same as what we're going through, and the creativity that was coming out of there, I was so drawn to. So I was customizing t-shirts, ghetto blasters, doing record posters. I was always into my clothing and fashion, and approached some shops and said, look, can I do some adverts for you guys? And, can I do some window displays? So I've never been one to not go and knock somebody's door. I've always cold called all the way through, and even after the internet came along in 95, 96, I still cold call people. I rarely send anybody an email even today. So I still knock the door, pick up the phone, so when you got no choice but to go and knock somebody's door back in the day, 82, 83, when I was doing this, and I meet young artists today, and there was a guy who emailed me, found me, and he emailed me, and he was in the States, originally brought up in Newport, Rhode Island, and he started saying, well, how do you do this? And I'm like, when you get everything, then it kind of limits their imagination, and their initiative is the word I'm looking for, so I try to say, put something on paper and drop it through their letterbox, and they're going, what do you mean? And I'm like, just send them something. They'll open an envelope, but before they'll open an email. I said, and if you don't live by that rule, they'll never find you.
Well, on that subject there, I started writing to artists from prison, obviously
Yes.
via pen and paper.
Yeah.
And I found now that when I'm trying to get an artist, Billy Childish was one of these.
Yeah.
Couldn't quite get through, sending emails. You don't know if they're just being put in the trash, going to junk because they're not interested, they haven't got time. It's just another email that people have to read. You know, I'll never take it personally if my emails don't get answered. But
No.
when it gets to a point and it's someone that I do want, like Billy, what I've done, I just picked up my pen, hand wrote a letter, sent it off,
Yep.
and I would say 80% of them get answered.
This is what I'm saying. I'm on the same page, literally and metaphorically, right there.
Because it's a personal thing between me and whomever's receiving the letter.
And the most basic form of communication back in the, like writing a letter, is now seen as somebody who really, really has made the effort, bizarrely, but that's what it means,
And there was a comedian I was trying to get on as well. And I'd done the same to him. I did get a text message back, and it just said, "How old school?"
Old school.
And it was that got us in there.
Yeah, I sent out a load of invites to galleries and gallerists and curators and stuff about, I want to say 2008, so maybe 2007, so about 15 years ago, and I put them into an envelope, and I sealed the envelopes with a wax seal.
Nice.
I shit you not.
Yeah.
Did it get noticed? Of course it got noticed. Yeah.
You finished college. Did you come over to London straight after?
Yeah, so my degree, bizarrely enough, was in fashion design and illustration. When I finished my foundation year, which was at a great college, technical college, and we got the experience, all sorts of mediums and disciplines. And as I say, I'd always been interested in fashion and culture and this creativity from sort of nowhere. And fashion was always one of those things I was really interested in. And I read, obviously, the ID magazine, Face magazine, all the usual sort of, suspects back in the day. I thought, you're only going to go to college once, so go and study something that you're really passionate about. Because in actual fact, and again, this sounds perhaps a little conceited, I knew I had the capabilities to go into graphics if I wanted to, or go into fine art if I wanted to. But fashion was a challenge to me, and I thought, this is something I really want to do. So even if I get my degree in fashion, this is transferable skill. I'm not going to forget how to draw and paint. So when I get my degree, I can go on and pursue whatever field that I want in the arts. But I did hope to get a job in fashion, and while I was there for the 3 years, I won all sorts of awards and bursaries, and I did incredibly well at it. Now, in third year, when I got my degree, I got the award for Design Graduate of the Year and all sorts of stuff. But 88 was a tricky year. My final collection was picked up by quite a few members of the press, and it sold incredibly well. My art college were kindly let me use the facilities over the summertime, and I made up, quite a lot of stuff and sold those. I had always intended to go to London in the October, but I was offered a job in Paris, which fell through at the last minute. So I followed on my original plan and went to London. But massive recession, one of the many throughout the 1980s in London, or in Britain, should I say. And no one was hiring freelancers, and certainly no one was giving away full-time contracts.
Yeah.
So although I was doing freelance work for magazines based in Paris and in Italy and in New York and illustration work, there was nothing really enough for me to sustain living in London. It's always been expensive, and it was no different back in '88. So I ended up taking on a part-time job in a restaurant of all things, and working hospitality for many years. But all the while I was in there, I was doing commercial artwork for other people that I met in bars and restaurants. I was doing internal murals and menu designs and stuff. So I kept my hand in all the way through until I built up a sufficient sort of secondary business outside of hospitality that I was able to jump ship from the restaurant and apply myself full time. And from 1995, that's when I've been a full-time artist, making his income from that without doing anything else, which is a blessing, to be frank.
Yeah, totally agree. We've had several on here who have started their art career in the fashion industry doing fashion design. And it wasn't until, I wasn't aware that you'd done that, but when you mentioned that you did, you've still got echoes of that fashion drawing in your drawings of today. You can, as soon as you said it, I could see it in your drawing straight away.
Well, the work, the freelance work that I got mostly when I finished art college was actually for fashion forecasters. So they would be, predicting trends 18 months, down the line. Fashion business is a completely different beast now. 35 years on, it doesn't really work that way any longer. Although there are forecasters that the rapid sort of speed that sweatshops can churn out, designer clothes within 24 hours. So it's not really the same as it was then.
Yeah.
But the element of storytelling was based on storyboards, and so you had to bring in a narrative and typography and color and all sorts of stuff. So when I compose a painting now to tell a story, it's very much based on the layout and the construction of a storyboard was in a fashion story, very much so.
And some, not all, but some have text accompanying them just to maybe point us in a direction of where you're intending us to go.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and again, that probably comes from my childhood thing of looking at comic books, the voice bubble and everything. So I've always been interested in that sort of balance of, pictorial imagery along with text in a way. But sometimes you can mislead your viewer completely. So I did a series on the Great Depression of the banks collapsing on Wall Street and stuff, and I put on some facts and figures. And so when people were looking at the imagery, they said, "Oh, I can't believe it was so bad." And 1922, da, 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 da. And I said, "Well, that's the thing. The images are from 1922, but the figures on there are from now." Yeah. So it's that push and pull. You can get people to look and engage, and then you kind of hit them a metaphorical slap. So it's one of those things. So that's why I put the words on there as well. So I did the series on Malice in Wonderland, which was looking at corrupt, polemic, religious, abusive sects in America in the 1970s, and the phrases on there were supposed to entice people in, and then when they realized what it was, that's the joke, that's the electric shock. It's the taser effect right there. So
it's the hook hidden in the maggot, isn't it, on the totally. End of the line.
Totally
A lot of your work has underlying darkness, that's for sure. It's very atmospheric. Even the subjects that you often put into your artwork, them themselves have had personal dark stories as well, haven't they?
100%. And again, I've investigated everything from the corruption of the Vatican to prostitution in Vienna in 1898. I've looked at people going missing in the 1970s. The reason why I'm drawn towards this is not only because of kind of the childhood that I had and the importance of telling stories that aren't told, is that, art's been doing this for, hundreds of years. I don't believe, this trend of purely decorative art really only kicked off in the 1850s, when art wasn't in private collections, for the ordinary people not to see. That's when it went into museums and you could go along and visit that. And then, print changed everything so you could look at it in a book, which had never happened before. People kind of take that for granted, So, so I'm sort of trying to bring art back to where it was, tell a story that people don't know about or don't want to know about. They're totally determined not to know about. And
I'm with you 100% on that.
Yeah. And I find things that, and the other link between the stories is it's not just something tragic that happened in 1920. The other common thread, and it's a continuous thread throughout, is there's a repetition of this. I'm telling these things because they're still happening, So I did a series called Pallida Mor, which means deathly pallor in Latin. And it was about the first really investigative journalist, a guy who worked for the Pall Mall Gazette in the 1890s. And he found stories which nobody else was talking about. One of the stories was people trafficking between France and England, normally for prostitution. And he exposed, the people who were behind it, and he became a real thorn in the side of the establishment. And he was a real vanguard, and he changed a lot of things, including working conditions for children in factories and all sorts of stuff. And but the thing is, the reason why I picked up on that story, not just because it was fascinating and awful, it's because it's still happening. And the fact that these things still continue to happen, sometimes the way they address them is in a way that other people don't really think about. And that's art for me, So if you put it on a canvas, people go, "Why are you doing that?" At least you've started the conversation rolling, By the way, that guy, his name was W.T. Stead. And he changed so much in the 20 years, and after his constant work, he was one of the first journalists, editors to actually hire the first female journalist as well, anywhere in London. So he, as I say, he was a real forward thinker. But as I say, he decided, I'm going to take a break. I'm going to go on a cruise. I'm going to do this. I've worked nonstop for like 25 years here. I'm going to go on a cruise. And he decided to go to New York. And he thought, well, New York at the turn of the last century was just as bad as London, maybe 20 years behind. But and he thought, maybe if I'm over there, I can make a difference over there. I'll approach some newspaper editors and do this. And of course, luck being his luck, he booked a passage on board the Titanic, and he perished. All right. And by the way, as Belfast people say, the Titanic, they say it was okay when it left here. All right, so that's just a bit of an aside. But he was such a thorn in the side of the establishment that they wrote him out of the notables who perished on the board or on the ship. And it was about 50 years later, somebody was researching it and went, how come this guy never got a mention? So that's what draws me to do what I do. I'm looking for a story which keeps on doggedly repeating itself when it just shouldn't, so that's what I believe art should be about.
I totally agree. I mean, I find there's absolutely nothing wrong with creating or buying decorative art.
No, of course not.
Something that makes you feel good or sad or for whatever emotion it evokes. But personally, I don't understand why people wouldn't put a story in their work.
That's me. I mean, I've got my house is full of art, and some of it's bought purely for its visual and decorative, look and attractiveness and everything else. So there's plenty of good stuff out there. It's just not what I'm going to be producing,
And the difference is as well, Dameon, the story can really move that artwork up a few rungs in the internal ladder, if you know what I mean.
Always. I mean, I'm not foolish enough to think that what I produce is in sort of on one level just purely visually attractive. I know I can draw and paint well.
But that's got to be sorry for butting in on you, Dameon. Yeah. But that has got to be the first pull. That's to stop people walking past. So it has to have something visually, and then you have to entice them in to be able to visually see the story.
You can't be knocking on stickmen and then saying, oh, no, but it's a really important story. It's got to be right. But certainly, if somebody buys something and I think that this kind of misled, by what they think it is, I need to explain to them what it is. Which is why I rarely sell through galleries, because I've said it before and I'll say it again, the majority of galleries are very, very lazy, okay? They don't want to do the legwork. And if the artist is complex in his thought process and his creative process, they just don't want to do the legwork. Most of them are too happy to hammer a nail on the wall, turn a spotlight on, open the door, and try to take their 60%. I'm not having it. So because the story is so important, that's why I sell direct. I'm not gallery represented. I don't have an agent. I've never had that. I've shown all over the world and I've sold over 1,000 paintings, etc. And one of my biggest collectors has 47 paintings hanging in her house. So it is what it is, but they all understand to the, A through Z, exactly what those pieces are about. I've never sold anything and went, hey, they think it's just an attractive girl outside a church. No. I let them know, Yeah. It's too important.
The story obviously gives the drawing a bit more emotional gravitas, and that's what we're all trying to do, right?
Totally, absolutely.
Well, which piece that you've created, Dameon, has got the strongest emotional connection?
Okay, so it was one piece that I created. Normally I do works in collections, which is again a bit of a sort of an echo from my time in fashion, I think if back in the day, if it required 12 outfits to tell a story, that's what I did. And I hate to sort of make that parallel because one's shallow, shall we say, and one isn't. I'll let you decide which way around that goes. But so I tend to do things in collections. But the one painting that I did, which had the biggest emotional connection, was a piece called Crows, and it was a one-off piece because the story was told in that one image. I try to do that, for every painting I do, but for this one, certainly one image, and it's a painting, quite a large painting. It's hanging right beside me, 5 feet by 3 feet on canvas, which is quite big for me. And it's just a painting of a girl taken off a black and white photograph, and she's standing and she's looking slightly down, and she's wearing a Mickey Mouse t-shirt. And the painting's called Crows. So it was taken from a story which I read many years ago, 15 years ago, about a girl called Kalinka Pambersky, and who was murdered by her stepfather just around her 16th birthday. So her stepfather was a German chap, and he drugged her for reasons too nefarious to mention, and she passed away from the drugs that he administered. He then organized for the autopsy to be bypassed. This chap was a dentist, and he was quite well connected. This was in France, although he was German. And anyway, to cut a long story short, he fled as soon as he thought that, you know, there might be a bit of too many questions being asked. And the girl's natural father was never happy with the autopsy and the whole story of what had happened, and he decided to investigate it. It took him close to 30 years to get to the bottom of it and to get justice in the end. Germany wouldn't extradite this chap, so he actually got a couple of guys from the former Eastern Bloc, or former Yugoslavia, should I say, and he hired them to go across the border and kidnap this guy, tie him up, bundle him, and bring him back into a police station in Paris, where they were obliged to arrest him and follow through with the investigation. And it hit me so hard that, you know, the love of this father, the despicable nature of the stepfather, the complicit nature of the mother. Perhaps that's controversial to say that, but she kind of turned a blind eye. And this guy's just this thing for justice, you know, he just wouldn't give up. And that story resonated with me because of various things that happened to me when I was growing up with various friends and stuff as a result of the Troubles. Yeah. That there's a lot of stories which just disappear because people don't have the, you know, the wherewithal, you know, or the energy even really to pursue to get these justices, you know. And not only that, but the girl was born sort of in and around the same time as me. You know, she was born in April 1966, and there was something about it. I just thought, what a tragic story, but what a love story too, you know. And was justice served? No, because the young lady's dead, you know, and the guy's in jail. You know, it's not going to bring her back. And the natural father, he lost his own family because of it. Is everything he had. And the reason why I called it Crows was because in 1976 I was hospitalized with quite a serious illness, and I was put in an isolation ward in a Victorian style hospital, and I was basically in there on my own. Wasn't allowed, any visitors came, had to stay outside the glass cubicle. And every morning, it was up on a hill just out in Greater Belfast, and it was between the last 2 weeks of June, first 2 weeks of July in 1976, so I would have been 10 years of age. And every morning around 5 a.m. There was tall pine trees, tall trees out the window, and it filled with crows, and this murder of crows, you know. And the sound of them, when I say it filled with crows, it was hundreds of them, and the squawks of them and the way that they sort of filled the sky in this kind of like almost like tar, like bitumen, you know, across the sky, and this tangle of wings and the sound. It was something that resonated with me and stuck with me. And because I was very, very ill, down to, you know, 3.5 stone or whatever, and it was something that image and that sound has always then resonated and connected with deep trauma. And because when I read this story, I thought, wow, this is just like one of the worst things I've ever read. I need to sort of acknowledge this story in my own brain by painting her. And the painting was based on the photograph, which was the last photograph taken of her approximately 2 days before she was murdered. And in the background of the painting, if you look carefully in real life, you'll see wings, black wings, and that's the wings of the crows in the background. So that's the one with the most emotional content. And that's proved by the fact that it's not for sale, never was for sale. I did it because I needed to get that story out of me and on the canvas, almost in a sort of form of exorcism, you know.
Yeah, but it's not. It sort of almost answers an unasked question, doesn't it, you know?
Yes, absolutely. Art as catharsis, you know, and I try to have that through 80% of what I do. You know, there's a couple of things that I do, you know, paintings of my favorite artists or people who are cultural icons and stuff. And that's kind of my light relief. But I still do them for a reason, you know, because I think they're important enough to be documented. But as I say, 90% of my work is looking at things which people just don't know about, and I think they should be made aware of.
Yeah. Well, you're saying about cultural icons. I mean, they're cultural icons for a reason, because when you see them, that evokes a feeling of an atmosphere or of a story, of their own narrative.
Yeah, absolutely. A cultural icon is the opposite side of the coin of a stereotype. Stereotypes exist because those kind of people are out there, and cultural icons are out there because society has recognized them as doing something which has had a lasting effect, like a pebble in a pond. The ripples that come out from that, or the perhaps the dilution of the original idea, but they started it.
Yeah, I mean, you've got a couple of, well, I mean, you've got one that I saw of Francis Bacon and another of Johnny Cash, and both of them have got a similar sort of air of darkness and leave me alone attached to their image, as far as I'm concerned, anyway.
200%. I'm drawn towards creatives which are not intentionally controversial, because it's easy to be sensational. Anybody can be sensational, you don't have to be clever to be sensational, but certainly that other side, which is something that they can't shake and they don't want to shake. That's something that's in them. I'm drawn to that as a character, as a story, and certainly as an artist, if I'm going to paint their portrait, it's already in there, and I try to capture that essence.
Yeah, well, like you say, that I mean, them two plus many others that you put into your work, they've got meaning from the center of them outwards, whereas as you were saying, many today who try to sensationalize, possibly just for social media, they're controversial on the surface, aren't they? And it doesn't go much deeper than that.
It's no mistake that the sensation show was called Sensation right back in the day. I'm no big fan, it's another thing that I may or may not have in common with Mr. Childish, that I'm no fan of the YBAs. As far as I'm concerned, it was the biggest marketing experiment ever created. Mr. Saatchi, very successful, perhaps the most successful advertising company ever, and he got a bunch of people and sold them as a product, and that does not help the art world. It's already messed up enough as it is. You know what I mean? So all he did was feed it from the top.
Yeah, I mean that view isn't mine, but I can totally understand where you're coming from. That's for sure.
Yeah, just don't get me started on Banksy, or I'll wreck my mobile phone. All right.
And I don't mind him either. Horses for courses, though. If we all like the same thing, it'd be fucking boring, right?
When you come off this, just Google Black Lera, okay? BLEK.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
All right. You know what I mean? So anyway, moving on.
Yeah, no, I know all that. If there was you and 5 other artists, past and present, Dameon, what would your ideal group show be?
Well, here's the thing. I kind of admire sort of men of science more than men of art, to be quite frank, because they're truly coming up with something that's never come up with before. If somebody discovers something in science, it's always existed, but they kind of, no one was aware of it. Then they discovered it, right? So that's brand new, whereas creativity always sort of comes from, there's nothing really truly new. So it's always sort of based or something. You're always striving for your own voice, but there's very few things that are something, which is completely new. So I'd just like to start that way. But if I was going to do a group show, the people who I would like to do a group show with wouldn't want to show with each other, and they wouldn't want to show with me. Right?
That's ideal.
So it is ideal. So my favorite artist of all time is Ego and Sheila. So he would be in there. Toulouse-Lautrec would be in there. Walter Sickert would be in there. Andy Warhol would be in there. And then probably one of the great comic book illustrators, because as I say, people are a bit snobbish when it comes to illustration, and I'm not. I think that they are equally as good artists and draftsmen and creatives as some of the greats as they're known.
I'm with you.
So I would have Frank Frazetta in there, or I would have John Buscema in there, one of those guys. But as far as high art, shall we say, goes, it would be those other guys,
But I mean, you've obviously got illustrative echoes in your work, and all the time people are including it in their work, then others can't dismiss it, because it's there. It crosses over. That's my view anyway.
Totally.
And yeah, Toulouse-Lautrec, I can see his influence in your work also.
He was a poster designer. He's this illustrator. He's very, very line led. Because I'm kind of regard myself as a draftsman. I'm very led by line, silhouette, and negative space. And but then again, the sort of streets in Paris that he was hanging around, I'm drawn to that because he was going to the seedy side of Paris. Walter Sickert, the same thing, and Camden Town group of painters. They were drawn the the theater girls, and who were also working by night as that and by day as prostitutes, all that kind of. I'm just drawn to those people who wanted to capture the stuff that people would go, why do I want to hang that on my wall? And I've always been drawn to those people, and Sheila would be the zenith on that for sure.
Yeah, no, mate, you're completely right there. And if you wasn't an artist, what do you think you'd like to be?
I don't even have an answer for that. I really don't. I really don't.
Well, I've said this a million times on here as well.
Okay, wait a minute. Okay, so all right. So if I'm forced, it would be a writer.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you still couldn't get away from the creative?
No way, man. Well, the idea of walking into an office is I would just walk straight across, open up the window, and then I'll be out the other side, regardless of which floor the office was on. Yeah, that'd be it. Yeah.
Well, as I've said, that people who've had creativity in their life all their life have trouble answering this question. Whereas people like me who entered the art world will say this job, that job, that job, because it's a job that they've enjoyed before or wish they would have gone into before the creativity.
Yeah.
Something I've written down that I forgot to ask earlier. A lot of your work will have a vertical line, possibly even a coloured line, breaking the illusion, if you like, or separating the canvas. What is the notion behind that?
So it's something I started to do about, I guess, about 7 years ago. It's not on everything that I do, but it is on a lot of the work that I do. And the first time I used it, it was there. It's a multi sort of, it has multi meanings really, depending on the piece that it's in. Sometimes it's a line to say which side of the fence that this guy stands on, not necessarily is politics, to the right or to the left, but as society views him. Is he to that side of the line? Is he on the right side of the line as society would judge him, or is he on the wrong side of the line? The color of the line, if it's black, and it bisects the figure in some place, it normally is to do with running through their heart or their hand, depending on what it is, how they thought, whether or not they were troubled or not. So Francis Bacon, for instance, a black line runs right through the center of his heart, and another one runs right through his hand. And that's my sort of indication and my acknowledgement of how he was hardwired. In another one, it might be a white line. And for instance, I did a piece on a girl who died of drug abuse. So the white line is there to obviously, to reflect the drug, and also it bisects her arm as well, so, and it was an overdose. So it's a very subtle indication. And if you don't know what you're looking for, you just go, that's a nice addition to it, but it's there for a reason. And it, like I say, everything in my paintings is there for a very reason. I plan it all in my head before I even pick up a pencil, right down to the last sort of brush stroke. There's no accidents. It's already finished in my head. I see it in my head, and then it comes out. But these lines, so, and again, the color, for instance, there's a colored line on one of the Warhol pieces. That's literally just one of the colors that he used more often than not. But as I say, it's normally an indication of how society judged these people rather than how they judged themselves. And people are all too quick to do that. But that's what those lines are there for. They're an indication of who they are, as how they're seen by ordinary people, so shall we say,
Well, they definitely work, that's for sure. I mean, many people wouldn't ask the question, possibly, but seeing that little bit of line, that adds a little bit of mystery to people who will ask the question.
Absolutely. So I did a series called I Am Not, looking at the American Civil Rights Movement, 1963, Birmingham, Alabama, all that kind of stuff through the eyes of James Baldwin and John Lewis and those kind of guys. And when I put the lines in there, I determinately put the black line on the ones where there was a white oppressor, and I determinately flipped that, to make people sort of take them out of their comfort zone. Why did you put a black line on that one? Why did you put a white line on that one? And just by throwing that into the equation makes people look at the piece with an extra an extra eye. They really need to know what is in there. Or I did one based on the again, race riots and the abuses that people suffered, the civil rights movement suffered on Edmund Pettus Bridge in Selma. And the line I put in there was a red line. Well, that's obvious because there was so many people so badly beaten there, that was there. And they really did cross the line of what's acceptable. The line was, it was just ignored. So it was there again for a very specific reason. So that's kind of it. But it's not in every piece that I do because it's not relevant to every piece that I produce, but it's in quite a lot of them.
Brilliant. And I mean, you said you don't really go into exhibitions or show on the wall too much, but have you got anything coming up anyway?
Yeah, I mean, I normally do a couple of shows a year. Up until COVID, I would have done a show in, up until Brexit, I would have done a couple of shows in Europe, and now I can't. It's cost prohibitive. You just can't do it any longer. They expect you to pay the tax on expected sales. Who else would they ask that off other than artists, right? I mean, that's just madness. But anyway, that aside, then up until COVID, I would have had a couple of shows a year. I had a rethink during that time period, although, my business didn't falter through that. People who buy my artwork continue to buy my artwork, which was great. And I'm very grateful to them. But what I've decided to do now for the last 3 years is actually focus on one major show in London every year. And that's what I've done for the last 3 years. This year, however, I'm breaking trend and I'm still in the process of trying to organize a space. I've narrowed it down to a couple. And I'm hoping to do my first show in Northern Ireland in November this year.
Nice.
And it's my childhood memories between 1970 when I was 4 and 1988 when I left. So I've got a couple of galleries who are interested, and fingers crossed that that's going to go ahead. But that's going to be the focus of the year. That's going to be a big thing, and not only because it's the first time I've ever shown at home.
Brilliant. And where can people find you, be it website or social media?
Yeah, so website is Dameon. I spell my name differently everybody else on the planet. Thank you, Mum, for spelling it wrong on my birth certificate. She had no idea the internet.
Was it an accident?
Come around, yeah.
Was it an accident?
Well, it was a planned accident. Let's put it that way.
Good.
So
I like that.
Yeah, so it's Dameon, DAMEON.co.uk, and Instagram, Dameon_Preistly_artist. But yeah, so you'll find me if you put in Dameon because there's no one else. I have a little sticker made up, and it says "There's only one Dameon in art," spelt my way, of course. And beneath it says Damien Hirst because he doesn't spell it that way, So he didn't say it, but I didn't say he did, so it's fine.
Brilliant. Well, Dameon, that's all my questions asked, and thank you very much for your time, mate.
No, thank you, Gary. I really, really appreciate it. And if I see Billy, I'll send him your questionable regards.
Oh, please do. Yeah, I'm going to pop down and see him again soon. Anyway,
give me a ping when you're going down, and I'll come down and
definitely.
Yeah. We'll both go down. We'll do a tag team and really take the piss out of him.
All right, mate. Well, thank you again.
Do it, Gary. Cheers, man. Have a good day.
Right, mate. See you later. Ta-ra. Well, I hope you enjoyed that episode of the Ministry of Arts podcast. It's a podcast that's produced with the help of the listener. And if you like what you've heard and you think you might be able to give a little support, there's 2 ways in which you can do it. If you go over to the Ministry of Arts Instagram profile, you'll find a Linktree drop-down box. And in that box, you'll find 2 links. One is called Buy Us a Coffee, and it's pretty much that. You can make a one-off payment, the price of a cup of coffee. Or, if you're able and want to do it more long-term, you can become a Ministry of Arts Patreon, where you can sign up to support us on a monthly basis. And 100% of your support goes back into the podcast. And if you're not able to do that, that's absolutely fine. This content is free for everyone. But we would urge you to follow us on your socials and show us a bit of love that way. Either way, thanks for listening and see you next time. Ta-da.